Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMahon & Ransford, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMahon and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Dean McMahon, Anthony Paluska, and today we're joined by Osama Atta. Osama, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Super excited to be here today.
Well, let's dive right in. Let's get started. Introduce yourself for the audience, if you don't mind. Tell us about your current role at Altrio, how you got there, and kind of set the stage for the audience.
Yeah, so I'm currently the Director of Professional Services here at Altrio, which is a leading global provider of data and software services to real estate capital markets professionals. The company's data-driven deal management platform Origin helps investors, lenders, brokers, and sponsors harness proprietary and market data to automate business processes and close deals faster. So my role right now spans everything from client onboarding and implementation to helping teams get long-term value from the platform, as well as internal initiatives like defining playbooks, creating efficiencies in the onboarding process, and training the team to deliver a high level of service. In terms of how I got here, I actually started on the customer success side, kind of worked my way out, realized I like the more technical side of things, working directly with the clients to solve those problems. So kind of worked my way towards the consulting side of the business. Before this, I worked in a couple of different PS roles across a few different SaaS companies, often in fast-paced, high-growth environments. My experience has always sat at the intersection of client success, process improvement, and business impact. So over the years, I've seen firsthand how much the perception of professional services has shifted and how important it is to reframe what PS actually brings to the table.
Got it. Yeah. Well, let's just dive in right there. I mean, you mentioned you've seen how much it's shifted, and your perspective on things has changed a little bit. Any big things that you would pinpoint as significant shifts that have happened to the industry or to professional services?
Yeah, I think, professional services often gets framed as the cost you pay to make the software work, right? And I see it differently. And I think the economy as a whole or businesses as a whole have changed how they view that. PS is now the bridge from the promise to the proof. It's basically the engine that turns ARR into realized outcomes. And I think there's three things on why that matters now. And number one is, efficient growth is the mandate. So boards and operators aren't funding busy anymore. They're funding time to value, retention, and expansion. The second thing is that customer complexity is also rising significantly. So integrations, data, change management, none of that is solved by, adding licenses alone anymore, right? And then I think the third thing is differentiation is shifting. So feature parity is common, faster value and smoother adoption are where you win. And so my take really is PS should be productized, measured, and visible. So productized means building repeatable, scalable solutions, not just ad hoc custom one-offs. Measured means that you can track the time to value, the implementation margin, the NRR influenced, and the pipeline supported, basically the outcomes, not the hours that are being put in anymore. And I think visibility means, sales knows when and how to deploy PS as a growth lever, not an afterthought.
I was just before our call today, I was talking to Bo of TSIA, and he made a statement similar to you that if you're not doing this already, you're already way behind and you've lost. Right.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That we really need to be at what he calls PS 2.0. But I think those are powerful words, and it makes it a more interesting role too. I think it gives better career paths than let's implement the software in a week and get out of here. So.
Well, so you mentioned, I mean, this is your perspective of it. Obviously, we agree with that as well. How does your organization or how have other organizations that you've seen in the market feel about this? Because what we've seen recently is that a lot of the PS leaders are coming to this realization or have been feeling this way for a long time, but bringing their organization along to understanding the PS 2.0 or the right the different role that professional services needs to play in the organization is all over the board, right? Some are still resistant to it, and PS is still part of the product, and it's there just to make things work. And then others see it more as a strategic asset, like you defined. Whereas your organization today, and how maybe did you get them a little bit closer to the strategic asset part of the continuum?
Yeah, I think historically professional services was treated like, necessarily evil. It was like the thing that you needed to get clients live, but something that you hoped didn't stick around for too long. It was basically seen as expensive, not scalable, and a distraction from the recurring revenue model that SaaS companies are built around, right? In today's world, that mindset doesn't hold up anymore. SaaS companies are facing much more complex client needs, tighter sales cycles, and growing expectations for ROI. So PS has become a lever for all of those things, and it's not just a cost of doing business anymore, but a way to drive adoption, retention, and expansion. And when you can convey the value of that to the organization, which is basically what we've done internally, you get a lot more. You get a lot less resistance to that, right? Executives and boards, they're asking much harder questions now. They want to know how PS contributes to revenue. What's the ROI of our services function? Are we shortening the time to value? Are we helping to reduce the churn? So we're no longer just getting people set up. We're playing a strategic role in driving the outcomes. And that's a big mindset shift internally. And it's one that requires, I think, a lot of storytelling and data. So if you can have the data to reinforce, this concept, it's a lot easier to convey the value that PS brings to the team.
You think
Yeah, give us
that
some examples.
our
Oh,
leaders still in SaaS companies are because they only know the land grab. That's where they all came from. That's where the money they've been rewarded for. And as we've changed to a more strategic PS, and you mentioned the data, are they recalcitrant? Are they? Is this a hard concept for them to get, or do we have a group of leaders that have kind of gone through that and now they're much more open?
I think it's a lived experience kind of thing, right? Like once you go through it and you're able to see the impact, it's a lot easier to kind of come along and realize that PS is a very important, function of the business, and it's not just an expense anymore. You need to be able to kind of convey that with the data. But once you are able to do that, I think it's a lot easier to convince people.
yeah. What kind of new data points are you all tracking that help to tell that story?
I think there's a couple things. Obviously, is I think time to value is one of the biggest ones. Um, there's also revenue coming directly from the PS team. So from things like upsells or expansions for existing accounts. There's also the area where you can kind of reduce the amount of money that it takes to get a client live, right? So previously it may have costed X amount. You put X amount of effort into, refining your processes, hiring new folks and bolstering up the team. And now it costs 20, 30, 40% less while you're still delivering the same level of service and the same outcomes.
Got it. And as this shift has happened, right? There's more emphasis on professional services, right? Growing their own revenue, driving the time to value, doing all the things that you're talking about here. How, if at all, has that shaped your requirement for being profitable as a PS organization, and what does that look like within your organization?
Yeah, I think there's a few different things that are kind of driving the need for PS to be profitable and revenue positives. There's a couple different reasons that I think they're all interconnected. Obviously, the first one is the market pressures. SaaS companies aren't getting the same grow at all costs runway that they used to. Investors want profitability or at least a clear path to it. And that puts every team under the microscope, especially functions that have historically been seen as cost heavy. Second is the need to scale efficiently, right? As your client base grows, your PS team can't just grow linearly with it. You can't just justify adding 5 heads for every new enterprise client that you bring on. So you're forced to think about how to generate more value per person and ideally make the team self-sustaining through billable work or service packages. There's also a shift from output to impact, right? It's not about how many hours you put in anymore. It's about what the business gets back from that. So whether that's faster implementations, higher NRR, or uncovering product insights that lead to roadmap improvements, these are all ways that PS creates real business value. And when you can quantify that value, that's when you stop being a cost center.
No, I like that, and I want to go back because we talked a little bit about visibility and some of the measurability, some of the things that you had mentioned earlier, but kind of the things around productization that jumped out was, or I'm sorry, about profitability was your comment earlier about productization. So I'd have to imagine that your effort to go and productize some of your service offerings and do all of that has been a big component to your ability to become more and more profitable and accomplish all the things that you just talked about. Can you spend maybe a minute or two on your journey from custom one-off solutions to more productized and repeatable offers? What caused that journey? What were some of the big lessons learned as you went through that process?
Yeah, I think again, it's something that you realize as you kind of, onboard a number of different clients to a product, you realize there's a lot of overlapping work, right? Or a lot of overlapping requests from the different clients. So kind of what we've done is something that we've done is we put together like best practices configurations for clients, right? Where instead of doing it custom one off every single time and building it from the ground up, we've created guides and built stuff into the product that is based around what we think and what we've seen as best practices based on the industry. So that saves our team a lot of time in having to go in and configure these each time. We basically give clients a baseline from which they can kind of start and work with, get comfortable, and then as they are more and more well versed with the platform, they can say, hey, we want to change this, we want to change that. And it's much easier to just kind of modify those things than, again, building them from scratch every single time.
Yeah, so you have some modular, 80% of the service is the same every time if you pick this one, and then we customize the fringes of it so that it's still tailored to the unique customer needs. How do you price that? Is that and has that shifted as you've changed your made it more productized?
I think that depends on the size of the client that you're working with, right? Like when you're working with like the smaller to mid markets, or especially like when your clients are startups, they're more receptive to kind of being told what works, what hasn't worked, etc. When you're working with larger clients, it's typically a lot more custom and you're kind of building things to cater towards their specific needs. So I think when you're looking at how to price that, it's just the amount of effort that it'll take you to get them up and running, whether, it's going to take a consultant 5 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, or is it going to take them 100 hours? And, I think one thing that plays a significant role is also the amount of data and things that need to be put into the system, right? Like if somebody's coming in, starting fresh into the system, it's much easier to get them going where they're building their database from scratch in the product as opposed to years and years of historical data. So I think when we're talking about pricing, it's hard to kind of like give a specific number, things like that, until you understand exactly what the client needs are.
Yeah, no, no, I apologize. The not a specific number so much as your pricing model, right? So because a lot of organizations that go through the productization journey, they might have started on more of a traditional T&M based model that builds up a number of hours. As we productize things, we get more efficient at delivering those kinds of things, and then the T&M model starts to break down because we can't pass along the same number of hours and bill for the same number of hours because now we've got more efficient. It's better for us, it's better for the client, but it
Oh
breaks
yeah.
our pricing model. So I didn't know if you went on a journey like that towards more outcome based pricing or something like that as you went through the productization journey as
Yeah.
well.
No, that makes sense. I think I totally agree with you. Like once you make those efficiencies, there's less hours spent on doing the actual work, which is less billable hours. But I think um at least for the product that I work with, there will always be a component of billable work because we're always working with a lot of data. But I think the value that this does bring is the time to value for the clients, right? Where there's a lot less time spent getting them up and running, and you're able to deliver value a lot quicker, which in turn leads to happier clients, makes the product a lot stickier, and more likely to renew, less likely to churn, right? So I think that's where the value in making things more efficient are, as opposed to like directly relating to the amount of billable hours that you spend with a specific client.
Hey, I want to
Right.
go back to something you said earlier, and you didn't mention. Are you guys doing cross sells for on accounts for other products?
No.
No. Is the organization have a suite of products now that's possible? When you find an opportunity, you get sales back involved. How does that work?
So the way that it works, it's basically it wouldn't be cross sells for different products. It'd be kind of upsells within the same. offering. So, we basically base it around like projects and use cases. If it's as simple as, adding additional users, we'll talk to the team about, what that looks like and then hand it off to sales, giving them the context. If it's adding additional use cases, so let's say the, client says, hey, we want to be able to do this in the platform. We want to start leveraging this specific feature. Some features require a lot of effort to set up, right? So we would then basically scope, the PS team will scope a project around that, define how long it will take, the level of effort, the amount of hours, and then kind of give that back to the client. Once they are comfortable with that, we would then get sales involved or, admin to execute that. But that whole process is run solely by the PS team.
Well, so we I mean, we talked a little bit about sales there. How have you, as you've worked in professional services for a while now, how do you work with sales? How do you build strong alignment with them? The connection between sales and professional service is so critical to kind of the organization's success. What have you found to be most effective at driving alignment and support from our sales counterparts?
Yeah, I think I agree. This part is absolutely critical because the value that PS creates doesn't matter if it's invisible to the rest of the business, right? So what we've tried to do is create that feedback loop in a few different ways. So one is building a stronger alignment with sales. So making sure that they understand how PS can help them close faster, scope smarter, and reduce post-sale risk. For example, we've had cases where having PS in the pre-sales process helped de-risk a large deal by showing the client, we had a clear path to delivery. So that kind of involvement needs to be intentional and it doesn't happen by default, but it also helps sales see PS as a partner and not an afterthought. So I think that's very important is, them understanding that we're there to help and we're not just there, we're not just another line item on the contract. Internally, we also try to share the right data. So whether it's client satisfaction scores, implementation timelines, or upsell opportunities that are surfaced through PS, we track it, we share it, and we tie it back to the business outcome. So once sales sees that PS is actually contributing to the ARR, it becomes a lot easier to have conversations about resourcing, pricing, and long-term investment in the PS team.
Yeah. Yeah, getting their mindset in the right place so that they understand the additive nature of professional services within their engagements is important. What about enablement? Anything that you've seen work effective there in terms of right everything from training and support and materials, and probably the productization has gone a long way to supporting that as well. But then also right, just getting you and your team members involved in supporting the sales process works as well. So what about now that sales is bought in and understands the value of PS, they want to do it more. How have we been effective at making them more successful at selling and incorporating professional services into their engagements?
That's a great question. And so we've done a lot of different things. So we've kind of put a lot of effort into, helping the sales side actually understand the product and be able to speak to it to sell to the clients. 'Cause it's a very technical thing and you need to be able to convince, the person you're selling to that you know what you're talking about. But it's also just getting, the PS team involved to potentially do demos, right? So walking them through the product in a very, very detailed manner, putting together, cheat sheets for the salesperson on, if they say, hey, we want to be able to do this, you can easily match that to this feature that we have in the system. And things like that, putting together, quick demo videos that they can share with potential prospects to save time on, doing live demos. And also just getting involved in and aligning on the scoping process. So like what we need to understand from the client before we can kind of move into that phase is like, are they ready to, implement a software? These are the questions that you need to ask. These are the kind of things that we want to see, the type of data that we need from the client. So that's kind of how we've helped them and enable them to be able to sell the product better. And those are kind of the contributions that we've had from a PS perspective.
As you've moved from cost center to profit center, or do you have agreed upon goals now of revenue and profitability, or are they letting you kind of guide that and you keep them informed?
I think there are certain targets that are in place, but obviously things are pretty fluid. I would say that it really depends. There are obviously, targets in place where we want to make sure that we're spending our time in the right places and we're spending our effort on the right clients and things like that. I wouldn't say that we have very specific numbers just yet. We aren't all the way there, but I can imagine we would get there eventually. But right now, we haven't kind of imposed anything like that.
So All right, as you've grown the team, as we've continued to expand sales' participation, and they're selling more of our services, and PS is becoming more important. Um, there's more pressure on professional services, I would imagine, within your organization than ever. There's probably more activity going on than ever, more projects, more clients as the business grows. How do you manage sort of prioritizing all of these changes, making sure that the team gets through that and avoids burnouts as part of the process, right? Like, how do you just manage the capacity? Because to a point you made earlier, we can't just add a bunch of new bodies every time we sell new opportunities. We have to find ways to get efficient, but we also have to find ways to make sure that our team sticks with us through a different level of workload.
Yeah, I think this is a real challenge, right? So PS folks tend to be very high performing, client obsessed, and deeply empathetic. So which is great until you hit capacity and suddenly you feel like you're letting people down on all sides. We've all been there. Lots of things are going on. You take pride in your work and you want to make sure that you're delivering the highest level of service that you can. But with so much going on, it can be hard. So I think the key is setting clear boundaries and creating a prioritization framework that lets the team focus on what matters the most. So that means looking at each request or project and asking, is this strategic? Does it align with our goals? Is it something we can scale, or are we reinventing the wheel? And I think this applies more obviously to like existing clients and potential projects. Whereas, when the sales team closes new deals, you're not going to tell them, hey, we're not going to do this right now. But I think, it's just, is it something we can scale? Are we reinventing the wheel? And sometimes, it also means saying no, or more often it means saying not yet. Maybe right now is not the time to implement this new use case, or you know, we have some more features coming out that when they do come out, this feature will work much better for you based on what you've described. So maybe we'll wait till that. And it can obviously be tough, where especially when, internal teams expect PS to just be stepping in and fixing things. But I think protecting the team is just as important as serving the client. If we burn out, nobody wins. One thing that's helped us is educating the rest of the business on what PS actually does and what we don't do. So just because we're capable doesn't mean it's always the best use of the time. That clarity helps reduce free consulting expectations and gives PS the bandwidth to focus on the highest leverage work.
Yeah,
You've talked a lot
yeah.
about educating the rest of the organization and using data. Is that a very formal thing, or are you more coaching them and educating them through interaction?
I think it's the latter. It's not very formal. I think it's, kind of again, if no one sees the value that you bring, then no one knows that's you're bringing that value. So I think it's intentionally making things visible, backing it up with data where you can. We track the amount of time that we spend on certain things. We kind of educate the team on the different type of work that we do, where we would get involved and where we wouldn't get involved. And I think that's kind of a theme across our organization is we want to be very protective of our time and what we spend time doing, right? Like there's a lot of different things that we can do, but we want to focus on doing the most high value items first, that'll have the most business impact, right? Instead of focusing on smaller things.
Yeah. No, I think, and I think that messaging is helpful for your, right. We're not saying no, we're just saying not right now or not yet on this particular topic because there's this different level of prioritization. The you, uh, you mentioned a prioritization framework, and then you gave a couple of criteria that you look at there. Is that something formal as well that you've introduced within your team to say, like, this is like, I mean, a quick checklist or some sort of actual framework there? Or is it to this similar question that Dean asked previously? Is it a mindset shift that you've tried to instill into your team?
Again, I think it's the latter. It's much more of a
Okay.
mindset shift, right? Like, look, again, all of this stuff is great in theory, but in practice, most of the time, you're basically just going to tell the client, "Yeah, we'll do that," right? But I think the mindset shift here is if it's something quick and easy, get it done, make the client happy. I think at the end of the day, what we're really focused on is the client satisfaction, right? And the impact. So if a client asks me to do something and I know it's only going to take me 5 or 10 minutes, I'll go and do it. Right. Because I know that that will make that client happy. It'll have an impact and they're more likely to, recommend the product or our team. And then when it comes to some of those larger requests where it, maybe involves training a new team, bringing on new users, lots of data imports, things like that, you want to scope out. And, it's not just about the capacity that your team has, it's also about the client being ready to actually implement that use case, right? You never want to try and boil the ocean, because I think one thing, you guys have probably experienced as well is when clients get into a certain product, they're very excited and very eager, and it can be hard to kind of set expectations where they want to do everything all at once, but from your past experience that it's better to take things in steps and say, okay, get comfortable with this, we'll move on to the next thing, get comfortable with that, and then we'll build on it. And so I think setting that expectation as well is part of kind of the mindset that we like to implement within our team. But yeah, I think it is a mindset. If it's quick and easy, get it done, make the client happy. If it's something that'll require more effort, be more deliberate about how you approach it, scope out a project, talk to the team about what we think we should do here. It's all very fluid, right? It also will depend on, how big the client is. If you have like a massive enterprise account, you're much more likely to say yes to something, whereas you maybe wouldn't if it wasn't a strategic account.
Yeah, we never say that. We never. No, I'm just kidding. we keep that on the down low. Hey, listen, this has been very informative. Great, love what you're doing. Love the organized way you talk about it. Leave us with a thought or two that you think really is takeaways for people that are trying to do what you've done.
Sorry, can you repeat that? Okay. So the question is, like, you want me to talk about how I got here?
No,
Oh,
and I'll count down in a second.
okay.
As we come to the end, I just want them to have a couple of key things you thought were most important on your journey, right? Just
Oh,
a
okay.
couple, like, hey, educate everybody, as an example, or make sure they understand how not to use you. It's just what couple of things are really, of all the things we've talked about, most important to you. But I'll ask
Okay.
again. So.
Okay.
Hey, thanks so much, man. It's been great having you, and we've learned a lot. We really respect what you've done. Other people are going to be in a similar situation. Share with us a couple of takeaways that you would say, hey, these are the 2 or 3 things that you should really keep in mind if you want to become you.
Yeah, I think if I were to sum it all up, it's, professional services no longer just a delivery arm, it's a strategic function. It has the power to drive adoption, retention, and expansion, and even inform the product and go-to-market strategy. But to be seen that way, we need to speak the language of the business. We need to show how we drive the outcomes, not just the activity. And we need to build the internal infrastructure, the feedback loops, the frameworks, and the metrics to support that story.
Super. Well, listen, we've really enjoyed having you, and we'll have you back again, and we'll do a lot more.
Thanks again for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think Osama there was talking about something that a lot or all PS organizations are experiencing right now, which is the overall mindset shift that we've talked about on a lot of these episodes of um, professional services being changing from a cost center to becoming a strategic asset. And I liked how he kind of kicked us off. He had 3 key things that were causing this. One was the need for efficient growth within these organizations. Another one is customer complexity, which requires more professional services and more intimacy and guiding the customer through the implementation, but also realizing the outcomes. And then the third is differentiation is shifting in SaaS organizations largely, but I think across all technology businesses. And you take those 3 things, couple that with what we've heard from others around the land grab being over on some of these right? You've got a bunch of different factors that are all in place right now that are coming together that are forcing PS organizations to make this jump. So I really liked the way he teed that up and some of the root causes for it, but also some of the tactics that he's used at his organization to help get them over the journey of moving from cost center to real value driver.
Yeah, I particularly like the way he talked about the role of educating everybody, and we hear that a lot. It still surprises me that there's so much education required, but I think it's because people come from their own disciplines, and executive management, as we talked about many times in SaaS, is into a model, and that's the model they understand. And when they outgrow that model, or that model needs to be adjusted, it's uncomfortable for them. And a lot of the solutions to model change come from PS. And that's just a new world. And as I mentioned, I talked to Bo from TSIA today, and he thinks it's 100% they need to go through a change. So that was interesting. So anyway, great job. I also thought he was very clear, right? He was very clear, very organized, and I thought that was really a treat. And we'll have him back.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was great. So thanks, Osama, for joining us and walking through your journey, and looking forward to seeing where the future lies for their organization. I think all of this is continuing to evolve, and it's nice to talk to somebody that has an organization that's kind of on the leading edge of driving some of that strategic value there. So, um, if you enjoyed this conversation and want to hear more like it, like, subscribe on YouTube and your podcast channels, and if you want to connect with Dean or myself, LinkedIn's the best place to do that. You can find us at our respective channels, and we'll get back to you with any questions or comments that you have there. Or you can always email the show at podcast@consultantsway.com. So thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.